We good?
Yep, it's all you.
Hi, everybody. My name is Angie. I'm an alcoholic.
Hi, Angie.
It is a pleasure to see all of you guys. Just really glad to be here. I am originally from Greenville, South Carolina, and back home we lived in a little white house on a red dirt road. We got our water out of wells. We ate buttermilk, and we drank buttermilk and ate cornbread on a regular basis. And I had flaming red hair and freckles, and nobody else in my family did. And one night I was at one evening I was at the outhouse, and my brother locked me in, and he said, "I know why you look the way you do." He said, "Cause the mailman is your daddy." So whenever I would see the mailman, I would be like, "Daddy," and I would run up to him, and he put his arms around me and tell me how cute I was. And thank you for the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, because after reading that and doing some work with my sponsor, I found out that turned out to be a little pattern for me, actually. If you just, put your arms around me and pat me on my head, we were basically married. I'm from a family of Baptist ministers. My life was pretty much mapped out for me. My parents knew what they wanted me to do. I've been singing since I was a young girl. So, my dad told me one day when I was out on my big wheel that I had to take care of my voice because, he didn't want to work hard the rest of his life. So, just a little added stress. So I remember just riding my big wheel down the street thinking about how difficult that task is going to be. But my dad ended up getting a transfer from South Carolina to Cincinnati to preach at a church. And so we all moved up to Cincinnati. In the process of my dad traveling back and forth, he found himself a girlfriend. And what he did was he got us situated in Cincinnati, and then he moved up to the top of the hill with his girlfriend and her ready-made family. And so she had three kids, my dad did, and it was nowhere near like the Brady Bunch. But we, when we moved to Cincinnati, my mother had cleaned bathrooms for a living, so she said that, she would never ever have any of her kids do that. So we went to Catholic schools, and we moved to Cincinnati, and I lost my mind. Today I know it was alcoholism, but back then I didn't know it was anything. I was having fun. And so my mom decided that my mom believed that, and I think I know now what she meant as opposed to when she told us this, but she sat us down one day and she said, "Listen, you guys are going to have to be extra in whatever you do, because, you got 3 strikes against you. And 1 is that you're black, and 2 is that you're black, and 3 is that you're black. And you will have to do more, be better, the whole shebang." And now my brother and sister, they took that information and they used it to benefit them. What happened to me is that I all of a sudden was less than white people, no matter what I did. And so, like I said, my brother and sister did well with it. So I didn't really know that it bothered me until I did my first inventory about how, I felt less than. Like, when I came to AA, there were no black people in AA. So I just assumed it was a white person's problem. And, that surely they would need me for my words of wisdom, while I'm here. And so I didn't like black people. I didn't like anybody, you know what I mean? But we moved to this all white neighborhood. But let me tell you this girl named Squeaky was like 6'10" in the 5th grade. And her and her little posse used to chase kids and beat them up, the ones that were different. So I was walking home one day, and I heard footsteps behind me, and all I knew to do was to run. That's why I like that movie Forrest Gump. Because I was a runner, and they chased me all the way to the house. And I remember I walked in the house, I was so out of breath, and I told my mother, I said, "Whoo, they were about to kill me, but I made it in the house. Nobody touched me. I am good." And whenever my mom sounded like this, I knew it was problems. She goes, you know, Angela, at some point you're going to have to learn how to stand up for yourself. So I'm going to need you to go back out there and you fight her. I said, you need me to do what? And she said, or you can stay in here and give you the butt whooping that I'm going to give you. And I knew what my mother's felt like and only knew what Squeaky's appeared to be. So she was standing up under this big oak tree that was in our parking lot. And I walked up to her and I said, my mother said I'm supposed to fight you. Well, no, it sounded more like this. My mother said I'm supposed to fight you. And she said, well, come on then. So I used to watch my brothers box. And they would have their fist up like this. Then they had these two little pinkies. Then they'd be bouncing back and forth. I memorized that, baby. So I'm standing in front of this big Amazon with my fist balled up, rocking back and forth. And I used to think that the committee in my brain was only there as an adult. I know today that it's always been there. So I'm standing in front of this this Amazon and not sure what to do. And I kid you not, I heard a voice over here go, now don't forget to reach up. And then I heard one over here go, you know she gonna kill you. And then the voice in the back said, do it now. So I reached up. Oh, I got her like right here, man. It was the happiest day of my life, man. I had beat the giant. I had done what no school kid had done before. You know what I mean? Play the Rocky music. And I'll tell you what's interesting is that she was beating me so bad that my mom came out of the screen door and pulled the girl off of me. And when she pulled her off of me, I looked at my mom and I went like this. And she goes, oh, sweetie, you're just all kinds of special. I was like, thanks, Mom. And so my mom worked for this company. She ended up getting a better job. So she moved us from where we lived in the ghetto to an all-white neighborhood. So from the age of 13 to probably 20, I wasn't even black anymore. I listened to Bob Seger and the Silver Bullet Band. You know, my favorite girl group was Heart. And the first concert I ever went to was Led Zeppelin, baby, 1975. And I'll tell you what, I was at the Ted Nugent concert and with Ted Nugent and Foreigner. And Foreigner was singing Feels Like the First Time. And I looked around that Coliseum, it was 30,000 white people and me. And I thought, I am bad. And so I started hanging out with these girls. Started hanging out with these 5 white girls. They could do whatever they wanted to do. You know, like they would say things to their mom when she would say something. Like Rebecca's mother said, I need you to pick up your shoes. And she goes, Mom, bite me. And I just like ran because you say that to my mom and she will bite you. You know what I mean? And so, so it was just a difference. But one day, Rebecca came over to my house. She had a brown bag with 2 bottles. It was Annie Green Springs Boone's Farm apple wine. She said that her brothers had schooled her in the art of chugging and that we had to turn this bottle up and drink it as long and as hard as we could. And that's exactly what I did. But I can tell you what happened to my friend Rebecca was quite different than what happened to me, because when whatever, today I know it's alcoholism, but whatever that was moving slowly from the bottom of my feet up my body, I knew. I made a conscious decision right then and there that I would drink this every opportunity I got. And that's how my drinking got started. And I hung out with these girls. It was, well, 6 of us all together and 5 of us are in AA. You know what I mean? So we attract what we are. And so anyway, I was going to all girls Catholic school, and this nun, Sister Paula Ping, she slid on the floor under the bathroom stall in her habit and busted me smoking. And so I got put out of school, and I started going to a public school. And I loved the public school because it was like when my mom and us were going over the bridge, all you could smell was, you know, marijuana. And I thought, now see, this is high school. And, you know, I went on to school and never ever showed up. And I would show up when there was a musical because, like I said, I've been singing since I was a young girl. So I would show up for musicals. But as far as anything that I ever did in school, I really didn't do it. And so when it came time for everybody to graduate, that was not the case for me. And, you know, I remember sitting outside of where everybody was graduating drunk. and mad at the school because look at what they did to me. I should be up there walking. You know what I mean? And now here I am sitting over here at the gate watching people graduate. And, that's just the way things were. So I don't know. I'm an artist. So I always felt like one day somebody was going to discover me. I don't know about you guys, if you have any artists, but somebody was just going to discover me one day. As a matter of fact, I don't even think I was going to be singing, but, like some guy named Bob is going to walk up to me with a contract because I look like I can sing. That's how my mind works. So I was just thinking about this guy, but anyway, so I met this guy. But let me tell you this is an important story. So one day we were at my friend Rebecca's house and her mother came home. We were all down in the basement and she walked down to the second step and she yelled family meeting. And everybody rose up like a choir. Administration, there's somebody's picture like right here in front of me where the speaker view is supposed to be. And she's a nice lady, I'm sure, but I feel like she's staring at me. Anyway, so I go, I was like, I'm going to get famous one day. But anyway, so Rebecca's mother comes up the steps and they have this meeting and I'm sitting, I said, I may as well go. I mean, I'm not going to stay down here. So I sat. Her mother stood in the middle of the room with a big goblet of wine. And she was just, slinging it like this. And she looked at Rebecca and she goes, Rebecca, your father and I have been, and that's my white woman voice. Rebecca, your father and I, my sponsor says that what I say, what I hear and what people say can be two different things on any given day. So I said, well, I'm going to get famous. So one day my dad got me a job at a recording studio and I started singing in the bathroom. When I came out, there was a tall gentleman standing there and he asked me, was that me singing? And I said, yes. And he said, I can make you famous. That's all I needed to hear. So I went and told my family that I was leaving, that I would be back for them when I got my first Grammy. And, my mom was like, you aren't gone yet. And so I went out to Las Vegas with this man I knew absolutely nothing about. And I'm going to tell you something. I had some good times in Vegas until I didn't. And I'm an alcoholic. And I'm the type of alcoholic that when I drink, I lose sight of everything that's going on around me. And, the band could be playing the Eagles' Peaceful, Easy Feeling. And I'm singing Feelings, by Barry Manilow at the microphone. So, I finally got blacklisted and I couldn't really sing in any place in Vegas. And one day I was at the hotel. Now we went from having everything, opening up for some of the biggest people. I was having the time of my life. We went from having everything to having nothing. And this gentleman had his own afflictions. I won't talk about it here, but he had his own afflictions. And one day he had been gone for like 3 days. He came back to the hotel and he asked me if I would take him to the store. And I took him to the store. And he went in the store and robbed the place and shot and killed the owner. And he comes running out of the store with money in his hands and blood on his clothes. And he told me to go. And that's what I did. But I want to tell you an important piece of that is that as I was driving him to the store, I had a fifth of Thunderbird Classic between my legs, and I'm down in this. So by the time this robbery and this murder happened, I was feeling pretty good. And when I saw the blood on him and he said, go, we literally got a block and a half before we were surrounded by the police. And they snatched me out of the car, had guns to my head, and the only thing that I was worried about was that Thunderbird Classic. That's the only thing I was worried about. Can I drink the rest of that? Can I have that? Can I drink the rest of that? So anyway, we ended up going to court and going to trial. I got a floater out of the state of Nevada, never to return. And this gentleman just died 3 years ago in that Nevada prison. And I don't know why God works the way he does, and I don't question it. All I know is that this was my lot. I was to be introduced to you guys. And so I got kicked out of Vegas, came back to Cincinnati and told my family, that's it. I'm done. Now it's like I'm getting kicked out of states and, this is not good. And I didn't know you know, that I was powerless over alcohol and that it dictated and managed how my life was going to be. I had no idea until I got to you guys. But I came home, and me not drinking lasted all of 2 weeks. And in Cincinnati on Sundays, they have this thing called Sunday pass riding, where you can ride the city bus all over the place. And my brother and sister and myself, we just got on it and we went all over the place. And we got downtown Cincinnati to the corner of Liberty and Vine, and there was a restaurant there. And when you looked over, it was, you know, Cadillacs, Lincolns, you know, pimps, prostitutes. And my little sister goes, boy, you couldn't pay me to go there. And my brother was like, shoot, me neither. And I was sitting there thinking, I'm going over there tomorrow. You know, and that's just the difference in my thinking and my sister and brother's thinking. And I ended up leaving that next day and started going downtown on a regular basis. And I started hanging out until I just never went back home again. And I met these 3 guys. Their name was No Neck, Tie Dye, and Greasy Feet. My friends, they protected me out in the streets. And one day we were talking, and they had a bright idea that they could teach me a trade that would make me money quick, but I had to be alert. And I was like, I got this. And so what they did was they bought me a girdle. When I think about that, it's just ridiculous to say. But they bought me a girdle. They showed me how to go into department stores, roll up clothes really, really tight, and line them up around that girdle, and go sell them for the remarkably low price of. And I hung out with these guys until I got sober. My dad did not like any of my friends. He wouldn't even let them sit on his furniture when they came, you know, because we were basically bumps pretty much. And I ended up, 2 of the guys, I thought to myself, I remember sitting at the bar thinking to myself that I don't need them. I can go in and steal by myself. I don't need to go in here and take a risk like this, going to jail, and they're just outside waiting in the car. So I decided, I sat at the bar and I drank, and alcoholism said, girl, go in that department store and steal as much as you can. But I was intoxicated. So I'm walking around this department store drunk. By the time it was all over, I had a whole rack of Monet jewelry around my neck. I had clothes hanging out the side of my pants. It was so pathetic that when I got to the door to call myself sneaking out, the cop goes, seriously. And so he said, where are you going? So I was like, I'm out of here. And I took off running, and I fell because I had stuff at the bottom of my pants, and it was just a mess. And so I got arrested, and because of the amount of stuff I had, it was grand theft and resisting arrest. And so I go to jail. They process me. The next day I take a physical, and I find out I'm pregnant. And I can tell you guys that the only reason why I did not lose my mind in prison was because my baby was with me. Had it have been any other way, I would have lost my mind. And I ended up having my child. I got sentenced by the courts to no less than 7 years, no more than 25 years in the Ohio Reformatory for Women. And for every certain amount of items, they added another charge. So I had a lot of stuff. And so I got sentenced to prison, and I'm pregnant. And I go to court, and I was pretty sure that because I was pregnant, this judge was not going to send me to the penitentiary. Like, I didn't know. Did you guys know they send pregnant women to the penitentiary? It shocked me. And when he said that, I was in shock. When he said no less than 7, no more than 25 years, all I could do was just stand there, because I was just like, I'm going to prison. I just didn't have any understanding to it. And I had my son in the Ohio Reformatory for Women. The warden came to me right before I went, into labor, and told me that if I didn't find a place for my son to go, that he would become a ward of the state. And so by this time, my family's not talking to me. And so I called home, and my mom answered the phone, and I said, Mom, I need you to come up to the prison. And she said, honey, we don't visit prisons. And I said, well, I need you to come and get your grandson when he's born. And you could hear a pin drop. And my mom goes, Angela, you're pregnant? I said, yes, ma'am. And I need you to come and get him, or they're going to make him a ward of the state. Now, my parents, being the upstanding people that they were, they showed up and they got their grandson. They didn't stop to see me. I watched my son leave that prison through a slit this big. And I remember saying to myself with tears in my eyes, It's going to be different when I get out. His name's Christopher. And I said, it's going to be different, Christopher, when I get out. And you guys, when I got my freedom, my son was 4 years old. All the way down 71 South, all I could think about was seeing my kid, you know, holding his hand, doing things that mom does with their kid. We got to the Greyhound bus station, and it's more about alcoholism. It says, and suddenly the thought crossed my mind that I could put a little whiskey in my milk. Since that I wasn't being a bit too smart. That was me. And I went up to that bar where everybody knew my name, and I started drinking, and it would be years before I saw my child again. And the next time that my parents actually saw me, I was in the hospital in Bloomington, Indiana, just giving birth to a daughter. And I was talking to my sister the whole time. But when my daughter was born, I drank my entire pregnancy. I had no prenatal care at all. So when she was born intoxicated. So because I was giving her up for adoption, when she was born, they took her to the nursery and took me to medical. And so I'm laying in the bed in medical, and all of a sudden I hear these doctors coming down the hallway, and they come into my room, and they are angry. And they begin to ask me, how much do you drink? Why are you drinking the way you do? Do you have a problem? Your daughter's body is saturated with alcohol, and she will never be able to function as a normal kid or a normal adult. And which made me really, really glad that I had decided to give her up for adoption. And like I said, I've been talking to my sister. My sister told my mother that I had just had a daughter in Bloomington, Indiana. And my mom and my dad called the University of Indiana Hospital and said, do not give that baby away. She has next of kin that'll take her. And I talked to my parents. They said, bring her home. Now, I'm alcoholic. What that said to me was bring us home, not just her. And so I got stopped right before we got on the bus. I stopped and got a fifth of Jack Daniel's Black. And I got on the bus with just that bottle and a newborn baby. And by the time I got to Cincinnati, you guys, I was so intoxicated that the bus driver went into the terminal and yelled, whoever was here for this baby, would they please get her? And I heard him, and I remember like getting the diaper bag. I got her right here. I flip the diaper bag over my shoulder, and I'm drunk. I got that fifth of Jack, right in my right hand, and I got a life right here. And I head towards the step, and I slip. I can tell you without a shadow of a doubt that had I fallen, that I would have dropped that life before I dropped this. See, I'm an alcoholic. I lived and breathed this stuff. And as much as I love my children, and I'm such a blessed woman, but as much as I love my children, I know that I have something that's more powerful than the love that I feel for them. And that without help, they would never be in my life. So I'm walking off the bus. I'm banging her head up against the seat. I'm just a mess. And my dad, when I walk into the terminal, my dad comes and takes her out of my arm and grabs her diaper bag and said, Angie, we'll see you later. And I said, Daddy, what am I supposed to do? He said, I don't know what you're supposed to do, because she didn't ask for this. And he drove off with my baby, and I went back up to the bar. And I walked in that bar, you guys, and all I could say to them was, my kids are gone. And I started crying, and they did what anybody else would have done in the bar scene. They bought me a drink, and I started drinking, and that was it. See, my deal was that when I drank, it's like something always went with it. Some sort of drama, some sort of something always went with it. So I knew that something was very, very, very wrong. Now, I went from having all of this stuff, you guys, where at the end of my drinking, I was living in a homeless camp on the banks of the Ohio River. Now, I'm the daughter of preachers, been to the best schools, and here I am on the banks of the Ohio River, sobbing, drunk, and upset about the fact that I don't have my kids. I have nothing. And so one day I walked up to the bar to get drunk, and some guy asked me to go do some other substances, and I did, and it made me really sick. And so I had to walk 13 blocks from the bar back to this place where I was living as a transient. And I get back to the door, and I'm getting ready to go in, and this little blonde white woman like just appeared like you guys at this door. I know it sounds crazy, but it's the truth. And she showed up at the door, and she said, "You don't have to keep living like that." And I said, "Ma'am, I'm sick." And she said, "Can I go up to your room and talk to you?" And I said, "Yes." And she went in the bathroom, and she got a cold rag, and she put it on my forehead, and she began to talk about Alcoholics Anonymous. She started talking about her drinking, but she didn't talk about how much she drank. She talked about what her drinking had done to her, and what her drinking had done to her family and her relationship with her kids, her job. And I heard it. I heard it. And she said, "Why don't you go somewhere with me tonight?" And I said, "Is it going to make me feel better?" And she said, "Yeah." And it was my first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. Now, when we pulled up to this clubhouse, it was about 300 Harleys parked out front. And what seemed to me like, 200 Caucasian people with white cups. And I thought, well, this is going to be an interesting party. And I start walking up the walk, and some older white gentleman reaches his hand out, and he goes, "I'm Wino Bill." Wow. Okay, Mr. Wino. Start going up a little more, and I'm Big Book Tom. Welcome. I'm 12 and 12 Larry. Welcome. And I said, well, they got interesting nicknames, whatever this place is. So I go up the steps into the building, and right when I'm getting ready to go in, the biggest biker dude I ever seen in my life put his arms around my waist, lifted me up off the ground, and said, "Welcome to Alcoholics Anonymous. My name is Squirrel." And I was like, "Squirrel, you're going to have to put me down, man." Yeah, like, I don't even know you. And we went into the building, and that guy Squirrel ended up blowing his brains out. I mean, I had been sober like 3 months, and he killed himself. Anyway, so I'm in this clubhouse. I'm at this meeting, and they're reading stuff. And the only thing I knew, because, my parents were ministers, so I knew when they passed the basket, that you either put something in it or take it out. It's up to you. But I'm sitting at this meeting, and this white guy gets up to the podium after he did all the readings. And this is what I heard. May not have been what he said, but this is what I heard. "My name's so-and-so, and I'm an alcoholic. I'm grateful to be here, grateful to be an alcoholic. I'm thankful to be an alcoholic. I'm gratefully thankful to be an alcoholic." And I remember sitting there thinking, this dude is serious about this stuff. And he told his whole story. I don't really remember a lot of it, but what I do remember is that afterwards, they grabbed hands and they prayed. And I was the only one with my eyes open. And I looked at everybody around that circle, and the only person that didn't have their eyes closed was me. And after that meeting, she asked me a couple questions. And she said, "Would you come back with me?" And I started going to meetings with her. And I ended up getting a sponsor, and stayed sober for a little while. You know what I mean? Doing really, really good. And one night, I don't mean in disrespect, but about this time, this crack situation came into existence. And we're at the clubhouse, and I did some volunteer work at the clubhouse. So I was putting my stuff up, went back to the back of the clubhouse room, and there was about 10 people sitting there. And everybody's eyes was really, really wide open. And they said that they smoked crack, and that, they had been put out of their apartment by the dope boys. And I'm like, well, I'll tell you what, you can stay here. Don't talk. Don't tell anybody that story. And just sit here and listen to the message. And since you're all here together, I'll sponsor you. And, so I started having my, I like to call them my little Jimmy Swaggart moments, where I'd be at the back of the room reading the big book at the top of my lungs. And my sponsor would call me up to where she was, and she would call me up. She was from England, and she goes, "What are you doing?" And I said, "I'm carrying the message." And she goes, "Well, why are you doing it so loudly?" And I was like, look at them. Do they look like I need to be talking softly to them? And I'm telling you this to tell you this. One day, when a cloud on the horizon, I was sitting at a meeting, and you guys were talking about God was using you as an instrument. And I said, you know what? I think God is using me as an instrument too. And I think that he want me to go find some black people and bring them into AA. So I was sitting at the meeting and I said, you know what? That's what I'm going to do. So I grabbed my big book, and my sponsor got me the big industrial one for some reason. So I grabbed my big industrial big book, and I go out the door of that clubhouse, and I said, the first black person I see, I'm going to carry the message of Alcoholics Anonymous. Now, mind you, I was carrying the mess, but I go down to the bus stop, and a couple stops later, this guy gets on, and I slide over next to him in his seat, and I said, he was intoxicated. I said, hey, look, my brother, you been drinking? And he said, yeah, I had a little something. I said, you probably are alcoholic. The people at the AA club told me that, 9 times out of 10, once you start drinking again, you ain't gonna never be able to stop. Well, he was still cussing me out at the fact that I called him an alcoholic. And the bus driver put me off the bus. And before he put me off the bus, though, I told him that the people at the AA club have given me some information. The only chapter that I ever read in that book prior to getting sober was how it works. And so I figured in my mind that because this guy was black on the bus, I'm black, my parents are ministers, that he would probably understand what I was about to say. So I opened up that big industrial big book to chapter 5, and I stood up in the aisle of that bus and I said, rarely did you hear what I said? I said, rarely have we seen a person fail who was thoroughly following our path. And the bus driver goes, oh, hell no. He kicked me off the bus. And I said, and you, Mr. Bus Driver, are an alcoholic too. So I walked down to the bar where I knew my people were, the real black alcoholics. So I walked in, and you guys had shared with me the pain and the masks that we wear. So when I walked in the bar and it was 20 people on the dance floor, I was just standing there going, look at them. They're sad. They're sad. So I went over and I unplugged a jukebox, and I said, black alcoholics, they got a place for you. It's called the AA Club. None of you guys never have to drink again. They said, well, what you doing down here? I said, well, I graduated, and step 18 says that I'm supposed to, let my people go. And the bar owner put me out because, of course, I did the same thing there. And while I was standing outside of that locked door, suddenly the thought crossed my mind that I haven't had a drink. And I went to the bar and I drank. And, 45 minutes later, I was in a crack house. Wasn't my deal, wasn't anything but I've just learned, you guys, from me, that anytime I stand in judgment of one of God's kids, that I'm doomed to experience it on some level in my life, because I don't understand things until they happen to me. If they happen to you, it's like, oh, that's terrible. But if it happens to me, Houston, we have a problem. And so I was hanging out, and I ended up getting sober. I moved out of the transient house and into the clubhouse in a room where they didn't even know I was half the time. But I always made myself visible out on the benches because, I didn't want them to look for me in the building because I was homeless. I had lost everything, you guys. My kids, my family, nothing. And the only thing I knew, I ended up having a cocaine-induced heart attack where everybody in the room left me because I went down holding my chest. And they left me. And if it wasn't for this woman named Miss Janie who was walking her dog, who happened to see my shoes, you'd have a different speaker right now. And I stayed friends with that woman until she passed away last year. Anyway, so I got sober. And like I said, my sponsor, she was from England, and everything was, I just had a hard time with people and, wanting to hug. And I just was so mad. I didn't know what I was mad at. I was just mad, and started working the steps, and, didn't finish high school. So, my sponsor had me take the GED, and, ended up going to college. And I want to tell you guys, before I get off of here, about my daughter and my son. My daughter is 32 years old, and she is a doctor. And this is the same girl that the doctor said that she would never be able to function as a normal human being. And here she is doing her thing. And my son, I had him in prison, so I did everything right, and he ain't got the sense God gave him. So it's a luck of the draw. You never know. You know what I mean? But they're both doing really well now. My son just got out of prison after doing 14 and a half years. And my level of fear and worry went to a totally different level once he got out. And I'll tell you what, not sleeping, not doing anything, just so worried about his life. And he's doing great. I mean, he's met a great girl, and, you know, he's working and he's managing the place where he works. He's just doing really, really, really well. And for them to even speak with me, you guys, is nothing short of a miracle, because I left them. I left them and walked away from them and treated them like they weren't even mine. And so the forgiveness that's come from my kids, and the forgiveness that's come with me, you know, they come over here literally like 2 and 3 times a week, you know, and here were 2 kids that I knew nothing about. I knew that they were my kids, but I had no relationship with my kid. And here I am at 60 years old, and my kids being 34 and 36 and 33 and 37, you know, by marriage, I have, you know, 2 other sons. And I tell you what, I'm just, I couldn't have planned this life for myself. And when I got sober, all I wanted to do, you guys, was to not drink, get an apartment, and have a job. That's all I wanted. And what I got in return was I've been overly compensated in this deal. In 2005, I got asked to speak at the International Convention of AA in Toronto. And I'll tell you what, you guys, actually, I thought it was this guy. When they called me, I thought it was this guy named Tony playing on my phone. And so when the guy goes, "Hi, I'm so-and-so from AA World Services." And I was like, "Tony, didn't I tell you to quit playing on my damn phone?" And he goes, "Ma'am, this is so-and-so from AA World." So I looked at the caller ID, and it was New York. And he goes, "Yeah, we were wondering if you'd be the opening speaker at AA's International Convention." And I was like, "Me?" And he goes, "Yes, if you would agree." Well, I hadn't even registered, because they said they weren't letting felons in, you know, to Canada. So, you know, why register? And he goes, "Well, you got to register, but I need you to call this person at the Canadian consulate, you know, do A, B, C, and D." And I sent all the information. And the day that we were leaving for the international, it came in the mail, the letter that said, welcome to Canada. So I get up to Canada with this expensive letter, and I get to the border, and guess what they said? "Go ahead." No, this is a $200 letter. Somebody's going to read this damn letter. And so he takes it, and he has his back to me, and you can just see his shoulders, like, so he gave it back to me, and he said, "You're good." And that changed my life. The international changed my life. I mean, when I walked into the stadium, it was like nobody in there. So I was like, "Oh, okay, yeah, this is nice." And then when I did my sound check, it was a lot different. And I had a meltdown. Like, what was I thinking? Oh my God, I'm going to faint. But it ended up, I had a blast. And so my life has changed. I've been speaking all over the place and having the time of my life, and, you know, suffered a lot of loss this past year. And, you know, my dad just passed not too long ago. And it's been hard, you guys. It's been hard, but I'm going to tell you about the good news. The good news is, even in the midst of being with my father through his passing and saying goodbye to him, the one thing that gave me so much hope and so much strength is that I knew you guys would be there for me. And I never had anybody be anywhere for me in my life. And you guys showed up, man. You know, showed up. And I remember when I first got sober, my mother she would let me out of her car like 3 blocks away, because she didn't want nobody to see her car there. You know what I mean? So in the end, right before she had her last breath, she goes, "You tell the people
to take good care of you. And I said, I'm good. They've been doing pretty good. You know what I mean? So, like I said, I do the same thing today that I did when I first got sober. I go to meetings, I sponsor, I read the book, I trust God, and I clean house. And in the midst of being in the house, you know what I mean? I'm high risk because I have COPD. So I can't, really go out. And I've learned quite a few things that I can do that I didn't know I could do. And I started playing the guitar, self-taught, and, I'm boogieing. So you guys will be hearing from me one day. But all is well. All is well. I'll be glad when all this, what we're going through, is over, so that I can just feel, man, the love from the hugs. You know what I mean? Like, I could have the worst day in the world, man, and I could go to a meeting and just to see you guys there, welcoming me and, throwing a big party for my anniversary and just all this stuff. I have a life that I could never, ever have dreamt of for myself. God has been so good to me, you guys. And the biggest gift that I've received as a result of not drinking is my relationship with a higher power. And, my parents talked about it all my life. But it wasn't until I experienced that personal relationship with God when I knew without a shadow of a doubt that there was a power working in my life that had way more strength than I did, and who has turned my entire life around. You haven't heard me cuss during this talk because I don't believe that spirituality and profanity go together. But prior to that, they talked about me in meetings all the time because I had the worst mouth ever. Today, I choose to walk in integrity because I know what it's like to not have any at all. I'm really, really thankful, you guys, that I was asked to speak with you this evening. And I love you all. And thank you so much for listening. Thank you.